I was going to start off with Diogwich because that's hello in Irish, but we should be speaking Ukrainian at the beginning of this interview. So, добрый день, Інна, як справи?
Привіт. Добре, дякую. Як твої справи?
Все добре. Я з Ірландії зараз і все добре тут. Як ти і де ти зараз?
Я на Західній Україні. Ми говорили з тобою 2,5 місяці тому, і тоді я була у Херсоні під окупацією, але мені вдалося потім виїхати, і я знаходжуся на Західній Україні. Тут спокійно, але в Україні будь-де є небезпечно все одно.
Так, розумію. So last time we spoke, since it will save me having to do subtitles for the entire interview, when we spoke, it was probably around days 7 or 8 of Russia's latest invasion of Ukraine. And at that time, you were still in Kherson, and the situation was pretty scary. There was actually some shelling while we did the interview. And yeah, it was good to see that you managed to get out of Kherson. Okay, so Kherson currently is still under Russian occupation. And there has been a counteroffensive that started in the region maybe a few days ago. So maybe there's some hope that it will be liberated going forward pretty soon. So tell us a little bit about your story of escaping Kherson, because it had already been seized by Russia. Just so everyone knows who's watching, the first thing I should say is Inna has a platform teaching foreigners to speak Ukrainian, hence why we started the conversation in Ukrainian. And yeah, so you were there in Kherson. The city is in the south of Ukraine. It is just a little bit south of Mykolaiv, and it is north of Crimea. We can say if people understand it. So a direct route to why it's important is that it has the Danube, I was going to say the Danube Delta, but that's obviously another part of Ukraine, of Vilkova. It has the Dnipro Delta. So Dnipro is the biggest river, the Dnieper River, which runs through the country, kind of bisects the country, and it flows out to the sea near to Kherson. And also it is on a direct path via Mykolaiv to Odessa, which is obviously a big port on the Black Sea and a strategic objective of Russia to seize. That is why it is a pretty important city, and so people understand where it's located. So you found yourself in the city when the Russian soldiers had seized it. I think we spoke around day 7 or 8, around that time period. What happened next? Because as I said, we had that shelling when we even had the conversation. So it was a pretty scary situation.
So the situation is still very difficult in Kherson, and I stayed there 1 month and several weeks, and then it was more and more dangerous for me to stay there because volunteers, activists started to disappear, and they were tortured in the basements by Russians. So as I'm a teacher of Ukrainian language, a person who popularized Ukrainian language across the whole world, and I wasn't silent, it was dangerous for me to stay there. And as my husband is a military person, so I was alone, and he is at war. So Russian soldiers started to search the apartments of people who were activists, volunteers, family members of veterans or soldiers, people. And my husband called me at night and said, "You must leave. It is too dangerous for you to stay there alone." So it was very stressful for me to understand that tomorrow early in the morning, I have to try to flee from Kherson. And it was so nervous because up to now, there weren't any official green corridors from Kherson. So orgs didn't give any humanitarian corridors. They didn't allow to bring any help to Kherson. So it was very critical to stay there, and it was just our risk to leave the city. So there are different ways how you can go out of Kherson. It can be in the direction to Mykolaiv, or it can be to the direction to the Dnipro, Kryvyi Rih, that direction. So the different ways. So at that time, there was open the way to Mykolaiv, and we just had to go from Kherson to Mykolaiv. It usually takes just 1 hour to get from one city to another, and there is just 60 kilometers. But usually people from Kherson could get to Mykolaiv for a long period of time, and it could take 6 hours, 10 hours just
Wow.
to go 60 kilometers. Can you imagine that? So me and my friends, so actually the uncle of my friend, he said, I will try to take you out. So he, his wife, his kids, me and my friends with small kids, we tried to get out of the city. So we went to the so we left Kherson, and there were 6 Russian block posts,
Checkpoints,
and so we left the city at 6 a.m. And so my friend's uncle is a priest. So we said that he is a priest and he is going to take out people from the church community. And actually, yeah, we were with these people, and it helped us a lot because Russians allowed us to go pretty fast because they are kind of religious. And he said that he belongs to Moscow Patriarch, this direction, not direction, but this kind of title, and they allowed us to go pretty fast because of that. But it took us 3 hours to go through 6 block posts. But at this block post, they search our things. They ask us, who are you? What are your names? Show us your smartphones. So it was very difficult psychological to go through the block post, and we were very scary because there were soldiers, Russian soldiers with they were fully armed, and they look into your faces, they check out your documents, they say, open your bags, what do you have here, what is your family, where are you going, why are you leaving. They said, you don't need to leave, stay there, we are good, we won't do anything bad. So, but we say we want to go out. And it was very scary. It was so dangerous, and it was the worst day of my life. And it took me 20 hours to get from Kherson to the western Ukraine. And I want to tell you that it was very fast, because usually for many people it takes 3, 5, even 7 days to. Yes, that's true. And I fled from Kherson at the end of March. And right now it is almost impossible to leave the city. So since the day, it became more harder and harder to leave the city and the whole region. And it is very popular among Russian soldiers to take bribes. So if you want to leave the city, you should give them $200-300, maybe $500, so they can ask any sum of money for you. If you want to cross the block post, give money. Sometimes they enjoy for people to suffer and to stay in the cars for many hours. They say, we not allow you to go, please stay at the block post longer. So it's very difficult, and people are like my friends, they were in the cars for 12 hours. It is not allowed for you to go and to go to the toilet, because they don't allow you to do that, or there are mines, so you can't just go out from the car and go into the bush to pee. I'm sorry for saying that, but it is dangerous. And some of people did that. I know my friends, my cousins' friends, they died because they weren't very careful, and they died because they went on a mine. And many people suffered who tried, because again, I want to tell you, 100 days of war. There weren't any green corridor to live out of Kherson. And many people, they didn't want to leave the city, but they couldn't stay there because of the hunger, because of the problems with the medicine, because you can't get anything, and it is very difficult psychological to stay there because you are under this pressure all the time there. And I want to tell you that my mom left Kherson 1 month ago, and she's a teacher of Ukrainian language and literature at school. And I just I beg her every day, Mom, please leave. Mom, please leave. It is too dangerous for you to stay there, because soldiers came to schools, especially to her school, and they started to pick up the list of the teachers, members of the families. What do they do? And they came to the school and took forbidden literature as books of Ukrainian language, history, literature. And I said, Mom, it is too dangerous for you to stay there, because they said that they will force teachers to use Russian program of education. Of course, they will forbid Ukrainian language, literature. And my mom, she said, what will I do? Where will I work? And I said, you have to leave, please leave, please leave. And when she tried to flee from the Kherson, she stayed 5 days at one blog post. 5 days.
Wow, that's insane. 5 days. Let me stop you there in the story. So your own situation was that because you went with someone who was able to claim at least that he was affiliated with the Moscow Patriotic Orthodox Church, that facilitated you getting out within a few hours. But for other people, they could be literally stuck there 4 days at a checkpoint. So that's interesting that saying that you're with the Moscow Patriarchy helps with getting out there, because they assume if you're with that religious denomination that you're more likely to be pro-Russian. But I guess then they must be wondering why are you trying to leave, since we're occupying here, or liberating as they would try to describe it, and making it like Russia. Why would you want to leave? Well, there's a lot of good reasons to want to leave, and I think you touched on them a little bit with respect to, you were hearing about people being abducted, intimidated, tortured, especially those who are less likely or assumed to be to resist Russian control, whether it happens to be not just military control but also ideological control in the region. And I've also been hearing that from people not in the city of Kherson but also in the hinterland outside, that especially in the last few weeks it's become more and more violent. There is, this is what people tell me. We're still in contact, and I've been in contact with people who are still there in Kherson, that it's like kind of what you described. They go around with lists of people. They try to identify who's most likely to resist. Not necessarily that they would take up arms, but just to resist Russification, which is like basically trying to turn it into Russia. And they start looting in these areas. They kidnap people. Actually, people I've interviewed, when I was doing my travel vlogs, have disappeared. And I hear this not just in Kherson, but also in Zaporizhzhia Oblast, the parts that are under Russian occupation at the moment, new occupation. So definitely a very scary situation if you are there behind. So what are the living conditions like outside of intimidation, harassment, potential abduction and murder in Kherson? You mentioned the humanitarian situation. Like Russian state TV obviously tries to say that everything is amazing now in Kherson and all these occupied areas. I should point out also that Kherson was not leveled or razed and destroyed like, say, cities like Mariupol or Volnovakha have been, and recently Severodonetsk in Donbass, because there wasn't as heavy fighting in Kherson and they were able to seize the city without destroying it. They maybe will be able to show a little bit more plausibly that things look normal, whilst they try to do the same in Mariupol. Everything is great, and you look at this, it looks like the Second World War. There's nothing left. It's just so bizarre. But in Kherson, what is the situation actually on the ground in terms of getting food, medicine, and going about your daily life, internet, all these kind of things?
The situation is very tough right now. And I want to tell you that when I was in Kherson, it was difficult to get food, especially bread, milk, yogurt, also such products as meat, fish, sausages. It was just almost impossible, and it's still very difficult. And I know very well what is going on in Kherson because I am in contact with Kherson volunteers and I help them a lot. I created the charity project Buy T-shirt Save Ukrainian Life. So I have a website and I sell their products with Ukrainian symbols. For example, like I have a bag you can see made in Ukraine, and I collect money for people in Kherson. And up to now, I have collected $15,000. So every day I send this
amazing.
money. Yes, so this is the 100% profit that I collected, and I send this money every day to uh, my friends who are volunteers in Kherson, who are very brave people, believe me. So so every day they send me a photo report, a video report, how they collect food, like different kind of forrages, rice, buckwheat, or for example, like pasta, sugar, salt. Then they collect some cookies, they bake some bread for people, and they collect these packages with food. And people come to them and they give these packages with food to them. And also, they have drivers who bring these packages with food to people in the Kherson region. Because in Kherson, it is tough, but in Kherson region, in the villages, the situation is even worse. Because you know that to Kherson is not allowed to bring humanitarian aid or just products, Ukrainian products. So in the city it's tough, but in the villages they don't get any products at all. And my volunteers, they help to people. They bring them medicine, they bring them diapers for small kids, like soap, shampoo, a lot of this kind of hygienical items. And Russians, they bring food and medicine from Crimea, and a lot of people don't want to take it, so they suffer from hunger, or they can survive with the help of local volunteers who help. And also, well, some people don't have choice, but they should take or buy Russian food, and everything is very expensive. So the prices are very high, just in 3 or 4 times, like very expensive. So, and also about the internet connection and mobile connection, also it disappeared before for a couple of days. But right now there is no internet and mobile connection for a week. So people in Kherson, they can get some internet connection sometimes with the help of some providers, because there are different providers, and maybe some of them they can get some connection. I don't know, maybe they take it from Crimea. Nobody knows how it happens. Because I have my admin of my school, she lives in Kherson, she's my friend. And sometimes she disappears and I know where is she, what is going on, but get some internet somehow. But in the regions, the situation is bad. I haven't talked to my dad for a week. So my dad stayed there, he's in the village, and I'm very nervous about him because I can't talk to him, no connection. He is alone. He is a retired person, and every month he gets like his retirement money. It's $70, so you know it's just nothing. And I help him all the time with money. And we talked with him um, 1 week ago. I sent him money, and right now I don't know what is going on in my native village. What is going on with him? Is he alive? Does he have food? Because I'm not sure. I think if there is no connection, he can pay with a card. You know, because I send
Yep.
him. I regularly
Yep.
send him money on card. I help him, but right now he said I'm out of food. I sent him money, and I'm not sure if he was able to pay by the card and to buy some food. So, and I can't call the neighbors, my classmates there, because no connection in the whole city, and that's scary. That's horrible, and I'm I'm very stressed about it. It's so bad. So I wanted to talk to you because I want to share the information about Kherson and the whole region, and the situation is very tough there. Yes, some Ukrainians say, "Oh, there is no bombing there. The houses are okay. It's not like situation in Mariupol." Yes, it's not, but not now, because I'm afraid that when Ukrainian armed forces will liberate Kherson, they will start destroying the city. You know, they will be angry that they couldn't have it, and they will start to just destroy it. Like in Mariupol, they will do it. I'm afraid of that because currently I read the news that our army from the side of Kryvyi they liberated 20 villages and they moved closer to Kherson. And I pray God they will liberate it. But I'm afraid that when they will push them back through the breach to Crimea, Russians start bombing Kherson, and I'm afraid that they will uh, they would like to revenge, and may uh, they may leave a lot of victims. So that's horrible.
That's what you're scared of. Just a few things. Yeah, what you were saying about the internet. I was actually talking to someone who was in Kherson just before we had our call, and it's the first time he said that he's been able to connect in a week because he's in a cafe that was about to close about 10 minutes. I didn't get a chance to really talk to him. And I just wanted to ask you one other thing. Ukrainian language, because that's you obviously have your that's what you do professionally. You teach Ukrainian language and you have your platform. I'll also put a link down to your Trojan humanitarian work that you're helping organizing in Kherson, so that people get food, so that they get this humanitarian assistance. And Russia does provide some humanitarian assistance, but you know, a lot of people don't want to take it because they don't want to be seen probably as collaborating with the Russian authorities. Also, that could actually be dangerous in lots of ways as well. So it's a very tense situation for people to be able to get food. What do you think the future of the Ukrainian language is? Because a lot of people in the south of Ukraine and the east of Ukraine speak Russian as their native language. And Russia has used this as part of their propaganda to say, look, all these people are basically Russians, they speak Russian. I'm sitting to you in Galway, in Ireland. I mean, this is the most Irish-speaking area of Ireland, and I would probably be hard-pressed if I walked around and spoke in Irish here. But you're not going to find probably hardly anyone who has an Irish passport who's going to tell you that they're English, for example, right? It's just the language and the nationality and the identity isn't very strong nowadays. I mean, Ireland's been independent for 100 years, but Russian propaganda has been using that, for example. I noticed just before this latest invasion in Kiev in particular, which I would say in the last 10 years, 10 years ago when I first came, or 12 years ago, that most people would have addressed me in Russian and I wouldn't have heard that much Ukrainian. But it had definitely changed in the last 6 months. I noticed a lot that actually people were speaking to me more in Ukrainian than Russian if they didn't know me. And that's a big change. So that trend of, we'll call it not necessarily Ukrainianization, but the people speaking more Ukrainian, how do you see that being after this conflict is finished? And presumably, which is what I've said on day 30, Ukraine will win, and Russia will have to leave possibly all of the occupied area and go back to the Zhori borders, but definitely a significant part of it. It will be liberated. Do you think that the use of the Ukrainian language there will be a lot more people who want to speak it because of this latest invasion?
Uh, that's a good question, and it's true that since the beginning of war, Ukrainian language became more and more popular, and many Ukrainians started to speak it. They realized that language was a very important propaganda uh, issue for uh, uh, Kremlin, yes, and Putin. And he said that I started this operation to liberate Russian-speaking people in Ukraine, and some Ukrainians say that yes, that was the reason for him to do this. Therefore, we have to start speaking Ukrainian. Some Ukrainians say no, he's a sick person, and otherwise he could find another reason to attack Ukraine. So personally, I agree that we don't have to speak Russian. We have to popularize Ukrainian language, Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian church. There won't be any Russian churches in Ukraine. I believe in that, and this issue is also right now is mm, is become more and more stronger here, and many Ukrainians are angry on the whole Russian Federation, Russian people, how they are silent. And for us, for many Ukrainians, Russian language right now sounds like something ugly. I can't speak Russian language at all. I can't right now even hear this language. It is something disgusting for me. When I hear it, I get this bad associations with it, and I feel I don't feel very well that before I spoke Russian also, because mm, I think many Ukrainians feel this, like have a guilty that before we spoke Russian language, that we said, oh, it doesn't matter what language to speak in Ukraine, Russian or Ukrainian. We watched Russian content on YouTube, so therefore we also provoke it. So and so many Ukrainians speak Ukrainian right now, and we don't want to have anything in common with Russia. And I heard a question that changed my mind. How can you distinguish whether it is a Ukrainian or a Russian person if they both speak Russian language? How can you do it? The question is, it is impossible to do it. Just we can distinguish people by their language, by their culture. This is their identity, number one. So I believe that after the war, Ukraine will become a very wealthy person, and we will proud of our language, culture, traditions a lot, because we have a lot of interesting that we can share with the world. Our cuisine, our vyshyvanka, our clothes is very beautiful, and we have a lot of we are proud of. And I believe that we must be we must develop Ukrainization, and we must be on our side for sure. Otherwise, if we then start saying, oh, it doesn't matter what language to speak, Russian or Ukrainian, we will have a war again. It will be repeated again and again. And I think many Ukrainians don't want their kids, grandkids live in the war again, because the history repeats itself all the time. We had this conflict with Russia many times. And even right now, in the 21st century, 2022, when we can think, okay, it's impossible that there is a war in Europe, but it is possible. We have it again. We have this pushing again. And if we want to do conclusions as Ukrainians, if we again say, okay, if I don't know, in 5-10 years we say, okay, we can speak Russian language, we are brothers, we are Slavic countries, we will have a war again. It will be repeated again and again. So I believe that we have to be very radical in this question of Ukrainizations. And many people understood it. And I believe that we will win very soon. We will develop our country very well, and we will build, I don't know, a big like China wall between Ukrainian and Russian Russian border because we don't want to have anything in common with them. So that's the thing that I wanted to say.
Okay. Yeah, it's a pretty grim perspective. I personally think that Kremlin has pretty disgustingly instrumentalized the fact that a lot of Ukrainians do speak Russian as their native language to justify invading the country. And pretty sickly, they have attacked and killed more of those Russian-speaking Ukrainians than the rest of the Ukrainians, right? They basically
You can, yes,
almost
you can see
annihilated.
people in the West. Yes, I'm sorry. People in the East and South suffered a lot. Russian-speaking people in the East and South are the biggest victims.
Clearly, because they're the areas that have been closest to Russia and attacked him. Yes. So the whole thing is so perverse. They claim they're saving and liberating the Russian speakers of Ukraine because they're oppressed by the rest of the Ukrainians, and then they basically murder and destroy their cities. And as you said, now you're worried that when they have to leave Kherson, they'll also destroy Kherson. They're basically trying to eliminate the Russian-speaking culture of Ukraine, which is completely, I don't know, for me it's complete lunacy what they're doing. Do I think that, I think obviously Ukraine had already been gaining ground in popularity in the country. I think one of the issues, I guess, has always been there's no geographical real feature for the border between Russia and Ukraine. And Putin said in his speech 2 days before the war, he doesn't think the borders are legitimate, and basically Ukraine has no right to exist independent of Russia, of him. And I think going forward, the big question is really what happens in Russia after they're defeated in this war. Do they reform? Do they stop being an empire? The bottom line is Russia is an unreformed empire. It behaves imperialistically under its current government. And unfortunately, enough Russians aren't doing enough to stop that or protest enough of it or help Ukraine. And they will also suffer consequences in the long term because of that collective failure to stop. Just like Nazi Germany in the 1930s, also the German people had to pay a very heavy price in the long run for that. So, Ina, I'm going to let you go. I'm delighted to see that you got out safely yourself. My heart goes out to everybody who is stuck there in Kherson, because the guy I was speaking to had told me that you cannot leave at the moment. You cannot leave. The Russians will not let you leave. And he's a guy who's probably in his 40s. Also, I hope the best for your family, your parents, that they're able to get out, your father, and nothing bad happens, and that soon, not just Kherson, but the rest of the 20% of Ukraine that's currently occupied will be liberated. So keep up the good work in helping organize funds and food and humanitarian aid for the people who are trapped there. We might as well say what it is. They're trapped. They don't want to, I guess they could leave to Russia, but de jure Russia, but that's really the only option. They can't come back to Ukrainian-controlled Ukraine at the moment, free Ukraine. And yeah, that's it. It's a horrible, disgusting situation that belongs to another century, the 1920th century. And Russia's leadership wants to drag everybody back to that. And I'm going to remain optimistic that they will fail in their endeavors, and we will go back, both of us, to Kherson Oblast, where I filmed last summer a good few vlogs and yeah. So, do pobачення, and best of luck.
SAR Experience.